If you feel undervalued, listen to this story. Ella was a young donkey, her coat a soft shade of grey that glistened under the sunlight. She lived in a picturesque farm, nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling green hills and bordered by a meandering, crystal-clear river. The farm was alive with the hum of nature, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the occasional clucking of hens that wandered about. For many, this was a land of promise and purpose, but for Ella, it was simply a place to laze about. Ella had a peculiar reputation among the farm animals. While the diligent horse, Rufus, tirelessly hauled carts of hay and the sheepdogs herded their flocks with precision, Ella was often found under the shade of the grand oak tree at the center of the pasture. Her days were spent idly watching clouds drift by or nibbling at patches of grass within her reach. She believed she had mastered the art of living, claiming that her refusal to engage in strenuous work was a form of wisdom rather than laziness. "Why toil when the grass grows on its own?" Ella would often muse aloud to anyone who cared to listen. The other animals, though polite, grew weary of her carefree philosophy. They whispered among themselves, shaking their heads as they watched her bask in the sun while they broke their backs maintaining the farm. Rufus, the elder horse, was particularly vocal about his concerns. His mane was streaked with white from years of service, and his voice carried the weight of wisdom. "Ella," he once said as he paused from pulling a plough, "life is about contribution. Without effort, we risk losing what sustains us." Ella only snickered in response. "Oh, Rufus, you're always so serious. There's no need to work so hard when everything we need is already here. The sun shines, the grass grows, and the river flows. What more could one want?" Rufus sighed deeply, knowing that words alone could not change Ella's mindset. The other animals continued their work, and Ella continued her leisure. To her, the farm was a paradise of endless comfort, and she intended to enjoy every moment of it without a care for tomorrow. Unbeknownst to Ella, the winds of change were about to sweep through the serene farm. Challenges she could not foresee were looming on the horizon, and her leisurely days under the oak tree would soon be tested in ways she never imagined. Days turned into weeks, and the farm continued to thrive under the relentless efforts of its hard-working residents. The fields were lush with crops, the barn brimmed with bales of hay, and the chicken coop overflowed with eggs. Each animal had a role to play, and each took pride in their contribution. Except Ella. Ella's carefree attitude began to draw subtle discontent from the other animals. "Look at her," whispered Clara, a hen to her companions. "While we peck and lay eggs all day, she does nothing but lounge in the shade." The murmurs of dissatisfaction grew louder as more animals began to share Clara's sentiments. The most vocal critic remained Rufus, whose years of experience gave weight to his opinions. "Ella," he said one afternoon, trotting up to the oak tree where she rested, "the farm thrives because we work together. Everyone plays a part, and your indifference weakens us as a whole." Ella stretched lazily and gave Rufus a half-hearted smile. "You worry too much, old friend. The farm runs fine without my help. Why fix what isn't broken?" But Rufus's warnings weren't unfounded. The skies, once clear and blue, began to grow heavy with clouds, and the air turned cool and foreboding. The animals, sensing the change, quickened their pace to prepare for the coming storm. Ella, however, remained oblivious, continuing her days of leisure. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the first gusts of a powerful storm swept through the valley. The once calm and serene farm was plunged into chaos. Winds howled, tearing branches from trees, and rain lashed against the roofs of the barns and sheds. The animals huddled together for safety, their hard work threatened by nature's fury. When the storm subsided, dawn revealed the extent of the damage. The barn roof was partially caved in, the fields were flooded, and much of the stored food was ruined. The animals stood in shock, surveying the wreckage. The farm they had worked so hard to sustain now faced an uncertain future. Ella emerged from under the oak tree, blinking at the devastation. For the first time, her carefree demeanor faltered. What happened?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Rufus, exhausted from a sleepless night of protecting the barn, turned to her with a grim expression. "This is the cost of complacency," he said. "Now we must all work harder than ever if we are to rebuild before winter. And this time, Ella, there will be no room for idleness." As the animals dispersed to begin the arduous task of recovery, Ella remained rooted to the spot. For the first time, she realized the gravity of her actions, or lack thereof. The storm had left her untouched, but the farm was in ruins. And without the farm, where would she go? What would she eat? The shadow of complacency hung heavy over her, and Ella's heart began to feel the weight of a responsibility she had long ignored. The following morning, the farm was a flurry of activity. Every animal, from the smallest chick to the mighty oxen, took up their share of the work. Clara the hen organized the cleaning of the chicken coop, while the goats hauled debris away from the damaged barn. Even Rufus, despite his age, labored tirelessly, pulling heavy loads of wood to repair the roof. Ella, however, stood apart from the commotion. She watched the others with a growing sense of unease. The farm had always seemed indestructible to her, a place of abundance and safety. But now, seeing the animals straining to restore what had been lost, she felt like an outsider, a burden rather than a contributor. "Ella," called Rufus, his voice hoarse from overexertion, "we need you to help with the ploughing. The fields must be prepared for replanting before the ground hardens." Ella hesitated, her ears flicking nervously. "I'm not strong enough for that," she mumbled. "Strength comes with effort," Rufus replied firmly. "And effort is what this farm needs from every one of us." With a reluctant nod, Ella followed Rufus to the fields. She was strapped into the harness of a rusty old plough, its blades dulled from years of use. The task was simple in theory: pull the plough across the rows to churn the soil. But as soon as she tried to move, the weight of the plough felt insurmountable. Ella strained against the harness, her muscles trembling with the effort. The soil beneath her hooves offered no grip, and she stumbled repeatedly, each fall sending a jolt of pain through her body. Around her, the other animals glanced sympathetically, but did not stop their own work. There was no time for pity. By midday, Ella was utterly exhausted. Her sides heaved, and her legs threatened to give way. Rufus approached, his expression a mixture of concern and disappointment. "You need to push through the discomfort, Ella. This work is difficult for all of us, but it must be done." "I can't," Ella panted, her voice tinged with frustration and shame. "I'm not like you, Rufus. I'm not built for this kind of labor." Rufus's eyes softened, but his tone remained resolute. "None of us are born ready for challenges, Ella. We grow into them. But growth requires perseverance, not excuses." As Rufus returned to his own tasks, Ella was left alone with her thoughts. She felt the sting of his words, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. She had spent her life avoiding effort, and now, when it mattered most, she lacked the strength and resilience to rise to the occasion. The weight of the plough was nothing compared to the weight of her realization. Ella's heart sank as she unhooked herself and retreated to the oak tree, the symbol of her idleness. She lay down in its shade, tears pricking at her eyes. For the first time, she understood that her choices had not only failed her, but had also let down those who depended on her. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, Ella watched the other animals continue their work despite their exhaustion. A deep sense of regret settled over her. She had reached her breaking point. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would find a way to be better for the farm, for the others, and for herself. The night passed slowly for Ella. The oak tree, once her sanctuary, now felt like a prison of her own making. Every creak of the branches above her and rustle of leaves reminded her of the storm's aftermath. The barn in ruins, the fields in disarray, and the animals pushing their limits to repair the damage. Sleep eluded her, as guilt gnawed at her heart. By dawn, Ella resolved to try again. She approached the barn, where Rufus was already harnessed to a cart piled high with wooden beams. Despite his years, he moved steadily, his determination etched in every muscle. "Rufus," Ella called hesitantly, her voice shaking. "I want to help, but I don't know where to start." Rufus paused and turned to her, his gaze assessing. "Start by committing to the work, Ella. The rest will follow. Here," he said, gesturing to a stack of loose hay. "Take this to the coop. It's a small task, but every bit counts." Ella nodded and grabbed a bundle with her teeth. Though lighter than the plough, the hay still tested her endurance as she dragged it across the uneven ground. The other animals watched silently, their expressions a mix of surprise and curiosity. For the first time, Ella was taking responsibility, but the task was far from easy. The hay scratched at her skin, and the rough ground bruised her hooves. Midway to the coop, she tripped over a protruding root, sending the bundle tumbling. Tears stung her eyes as she lay sprawled in the dirt. She wanted to give up, to retreat back to the oak tree and pretend none of this mattered. "Get up, Ella," came a voice behind her. Rufus stood over her, his weathered face firm but not unkind. "You fell, yes, but falling isn't failure. Staying down is." Ella took a shaky breath and rose to her feet. She heaved the hay back onto her shoulders, her legs trembling but resolute. This time, she made it to the coop without faltering. Over the next few days, Ella took on more tasks, each one testing her in new ways. She hauled buckets of water from the river, helped gather scattered tools, and even attempted the plough again under Rufus's guidance. The work left her sore and exhausted, but with each effort, a small spark of pride ignited within her. Still, doubt lingered. One afternoon, as she rested briefly in the shade, Ella found herself questioning her worth. "Why does it feel like no matter how hard I try, I'm still behind everyone else?" she asked Rufus, who had stopped to drink nearby. "Because you're comparing your beginning to someone else's middle," Rufus replied. "Every one of us started somewhere, Ella. What matters is that you've started." The old horse's words stayed with her as she returned to work. She began to notice small changes, her legs growing stronger, her endurance improving, and her heart feeling lighter. Though the farm was far from restored, Ella's determination burned brighter with each passing day. As the sun set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Ella stood atop the hill overlooking the farm. She saw the progress they had made together, the barn taking shape, the fields showing signs of renewal, and felt a newfound connection to her home and her fellow animals. For the first time, she realized that the farm's strength came not from its structures or fields, but from the collective effort of those who called it home. And though she was still learning, Ella knew she was now part of that strength. As the days wore on, Ella's efforts didn't go unnoticed. The other animals began to acknowledge her progress with small nods or encouraging words, but Ella knew she still had much to learn. Despite her determination, she struggled to match the pace and efficiency of her peers. One evening, as the golden light of sunset bathed the farm, Rufus approached Ella near the oak tree. He carried a worn leather pouch in his teeth, which he placed gently at her hooves. "What's this?" Ella asked, tilting her head in curiosity. "It's something I used when I was younger," Rufus replied, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "Inside are tools and instructions that help me understand the rhythm of the work." Ella opened the pouch to find a simple harness, a wooden wheel model, and a small booklet filled with handwritten notes. The pages contained detailed sketches and explanations, how to pull a plow efficiently, distribute weight evenly, and conserve energy during long tasks. "Why are you giving this to me?" Ella asked, her voice uncertain. "Because I see potential in you," Rufus said firmly. "You've started to change, Ella, and I want to help you succeed. These tools aren't just for your body, they're for your mind. Learn to work smart, not just hard." Ella's eyes filled with gratitude as she clutched the items close. That night, she stayed up late studying the booklet under the moonlight. The diagrams were simple yet profound, revealing techniques she had never considered. She practiced fitting the harness and tested the wheel model to understand how weight shifted during movement. The next morning, Ella approached the plow with a newfound sense of purpose. Following Rufus's instructions, she adjusted the harness to fit more securely and began applying the techniques she had learned. To her amazement, the plow felt lighter, the soil more cooperative. Each row she tilled was straighter and smoother than the last. The other animals watched with astonishment as Ella worked steadily through the day. "Look at her," Clara whispered to the hens. "She's not the same Jumenta who used to lounge under that tree." Rufus stood nearby, a proud glint in his eyes. "She's found her rhythm," he said quietly, though his voice carried the weight of pride. As Ella continued to improve, she discovered that her efforts inspired others. Animals who had grown weary from the storm's aftermath found renewed energy in her determination. Together, they worked harder and faster, their combined efforts bringing the farm closer to recovery. One evening, as Ella rested under the oak tree, Rufus joined her. "You've come a long way, Ella," he said, "but there's one more thing you need to learn." Ella looked at him expectantly. "Work isn't just about survival," Rufus continued. "It's about purpose. When you contribute to something greater than yourself, you'll find a deeper sense of fulfillment." Ella nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. She had spent so much of her life avoiding effort, not realizing that true satisfaction came from giving her best to those around her. That night, Ella made a silent vow. She would not only work harder, but also with a sense of gratitude and purpose. She was no longer the Jumenta who shied away from responsibility. With Rufus's guidance, she was transforming into someone stronger, wiser, and more connected to the farm she called home. The days that followed were a whirlwind of progress. Ella threw herself into her work with a vigor she never knew she possessed. From dawn until dusk, she plowed fields, carried supplies, and repaired fences alongside the other animals. Each task brought new challenges, but Ella faced them with determination, applying the lessons Rufus had taught her. The farm slowly began to recover. The barn roof was repaired, the fields replanted, and the animals' collective effort breathed life back into their home. But for Ella, the changes were not just external. She felt a profound shift within herself, a sense of pride and belonging that had been absent before. One afternoon, while hauling a cart of hay bales to the storage shed, Ella paused to take in the scene around her. Chickens clucked contentedly in the coop, goats grazed in the rejuvenated pastures, and Rufus supervised the repairs on the final section of the barn. The farm was alive again, and Ella knew she had played a crucial role in its revival. Despite her progress, Ella wasn't immune to setbacks. One particularly hot day, as she struggled to pull a heavy load uphill, her legs trembled and she nearly stumbled. Panic welled up inside her as memories of her earlier failures threatened to resurface. "Keep your focus, Ella!" Rufus called from behind. "One step at a time." Taking a deep breath, Ella steadied herself and shifted her weight as she had learned. The cart moved forward, inch by inch, until she reached the top of the hill. The sense of accomplishment that washed over her was unlike anything she had felt before. As the sun set that evening, Ella found herself reflecting on her journey. She no longer viewed work as a burden, but as an opportunity to grow and contribute. The aches in her muscles felt like badges of honor, and the satisfaction in her heart far outweighed the fatigue. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. The other animals began seeking her out for advice, and Ella found herself stepping into a leadership role she had never imagined. "You've become an example for all of us," Clara told her one evening. "Your determination reminds us of what we're capable of when we don't give up." Even Rufus, who had been her harshest critic, now spoke of her with admiration. "Ella has shown us that it's never too late to change," he said during a gathering of the animals. "Her journey proves that hard work and the right mindset can overcome any obstacle." Ella felt a swell of emotion at Rufus's words. She realized that her transformation wasn't just about becoming stronger or more capable, it was about becoming part of a community, one that thrived on mutual support and shared purpose. That night, as she lay under the oak tree, Ella looked up at the stars and whispered a silent thanks. She was grateful not just for the farm's recovery, but for the lessons she had learned and the bonds she had formed along the way. Ella's journey of transformation was far from over, but she now faced the future with confidence. The jumenta who once avoided work had found her place, not just in the farm, but in the hearts of those who shared it with her. As the seasons changed and the farm flourished once more, Ella stood as a testament to the power of transformation. The fields that were once desolate now brimmed with vibrant crops, and the barn, once broken, stood sturdier than ever. The animals worked together in harmony, their efforts knitting them into a stronger community. Ella, who had once been the farm's most reluctant worker, was now among its most dependable. She carried her responsibilities with pride, but more importantly, she carried a newfound sense of purpose. The oak tree, once her escape, had become her place of reflection. Under its branches, she often thought about how far she had come. One crisp autumn morning, as the farm buzzed with the activity of the harvest, Rufus approached Ella. His mane had grown grayer and his steps slower, but his eyes sparkled with pride. "Ella," he said, his voice steady, "look at all this. The fields, the barn, the animals. None of this would have been possible without you." Ella shook her head modestly. "It wasn't just me, Rufus. We all worked together. That's what saved the farm." Rufus nodded. "True, but you brought something special. You showed everyone, including yourself, that it's never too late to change. Your journey inspired others to push through their own struggles." Ella smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I only learned because you believed in me," she said softly. "And because I realized that the farm is more than just a place. It's a part of who we are." Later that evening, as the animals gathered to celebrate the harvest, Ella stood before them. "I want to thank all of you," she began, her voice strong yet emotional. "This farm has taught me something I'll never forget. That hard work isn't just about surviving, it's about finding meaning. It's about knowing that what we do matters, not just to ourselves, but to everyone around us." The animals cheered, their voices ringing across the fields. Clara clucked in agreement, and the oxen stamped their hooves in approval. Even Rufus, ever stoic, let out a neigh of pride. As the festivities continued, Ella felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known. She had learned that challenges weren't something to fear, but opportunities to grow. She had discovered that true strength came not from avoiding effort, but from embracing it with determination and gratitude. In the days that followed, Ella became a mentor to others on the farm. She taught the younger animals how to plow, carry loads, and face their tasks with resilience. But her greatest lesson was one of the heart. "Work with purpose," she would say. "When you give your best to something, you'll find that the rewards go beyond what you can see. They change who you are." Ella's transformation left a lasting legacy. The farm, once fragile after the storm, became stronger than ever, a thriving community built on cooperation and shared effort. And Ella, the once lazy jumenta, stood at the heart of it all, a reminder that with hard work, humility, and the courage to change, anyone can rewrite their story. The farm's success wasn't just about the harvest or the repaired barn. It was about the growth of its animals, their bonds, and their shared wisdom. Ella's journey showed them all that even the most stubborn hearts can learn, grow, and contribute in ways that uplift everyone. And so, as the farm basked in the golden glow of its thriving fields, Ella lay under the oak tree, no longer a symbol of her idleness, but a place where she found clarity and purpose. The wind carried her words softly into the evening air. Thank you, Rufus. Thank you, farm. And thank you, hard work, for showing me who I truly am.